Hi, my name is Noah Van Niel, and I was an English major who graduated in 2008. I'm currently an Episcopal priest and the rector of Christ and St. Luke's Episcopal Church here in Norfolk, Virginia. Reflecting on it now, I majored in English because it was an opportunity to engage with the deepest and most important ideas of humanity in really beautiful ways, in artistic ways. So, whether that was novels or plays or poetry, which was some of my particular focus, it was helping us to really engage with deep and interesting questions and doing so in a way that was memorable and beautiful, whether they were beautiful lines of poetry or beautiful characters, things that helped us to be able to really start to wrestle with what it meant to be human and how we could go about expressing that as well. I didn't at the time think I would end up as an Episcopal priest or have a particular career goal in mind, but I knew that I loved reading and analyzing and thinking and then discussing all of these great works of literature and then being challenged by what they were teaching me about myself, but about the world as well. My career path post graduation was not linear. I graduated from college and loved my English studies, but went off to be an opera singer. So the idea of dramaturgy and plays and performance, which was part of my English education, was certainly a part of that. But I was focused on being a singer and training for that, and that was a lot of fun. But learned eventually that while I loved to sing, I didn't love being an opera singer and all that went into that life. And so was looking for something that spoke a little more directly to who I was and to what I wanted to do in the world. And for a variety of reasons, that led me into the Episcopal Church, and the ministry, which is a place where I, wasn't really planning on it, but get to use my degree every single day, whether it's in reading or writing or communicating or preaching. All of that is something I get to really delve into, and that is something I feel entirely equipped for, and perhaps get to delve into even more than I would have otherwise. So I feel really excited about being able to use those skills, and I'll quote poetry in a sermon, or I'll talk about characters in a novel, in addition to having to craft and write and communicate with folks through language, which is a huge part of our human interactions, but really a huge part of my particular branch of Christianity as well. I use it every day. I mean, for literally a lot of my role is in communicating. And so, whether it's writing an email or sitting with someone and having an intense conversation, trying to listen well, think deeply, to analyze, each person as if they were a text and say, what is the story they're telling me? Why are they telling me that? How do I use my own faculties to be able to try to respond to whatever it is they're saying in this moment? But probably the biggest areas are in, preparing a sermon for Sunday. It's, an essay every week or every other week, a persuasive essay that you've got to try to articulate a position that uses analysis of a text, whether it's the scripture readings or, something else. It's incorporating, as I mentioned, poetry and literature and some of those great resources that we have as human beings that have also tried to address some of these same questions. So for me, there's not a day that goes by, and I have shelves full of books, many of which are, theological in nature, but I have 2 shelves of poetry books left over from my college education, and I've got, all sorts of novels and nonfiction, and so I'm reading and referring back to those and pulling them off the shelf in a way that I quite enjoy. It feels quite delightful and feels like, there was a reason I kept these around, to be able to do that. And so pulling interesting thinkers or quotations or passages and then working with those in addition to working with the Bible itself and the analyzing of that, which is very much like you would do with many other texts when you're sitting in a classroom, if you're lucky enough to be an English major. I use it, I really enjoy some of the thinking and the analysis that comes. And so with my friends, with my family, with other things, I'm the person who wants to say like, hey, what do you think about this? And send an article or share a book recommendation or something like that, to be able to say, I want to engage with you about your engagement with this particular text. And I think that's one of the great things that works of art can do for us. They are in and of themselves interesting and powerful, but they also impact us. And so then us discussing those works, those artistic productions with each other, are ways in which we then engage and connect and either change minds or open minds, open hearts. And so that to me feels like a lot of fun to be able to do. So even if I wasn't getting paid to do it, I would be probably engaging it in those ways as well. Sure. I think one of the ones that I always remember was my sophomore tutorial, which was a um, very small group, 8 or 10 people sitting around a table, and the professor had been there many years, and he was, this wise, prototypical professor who came in. He didn't even have a syllabus. He just said, okay, what do we want to read next week? And we'd say, all right, we'll read King Lear or something like that. So we'd say, we'll read the first act and we'll talk about it. And so we would. And I remember going from someone in that class who liked school, was good at it, enjoyed it, worked hard enough, to all of a sudden falling in love with what could be done with, a text. And all this, that's when I decided. We didn't have to declare a major, but until that time. But I decided at that point that I was going to be spending the rest of my college career in a lot of classes like this. And so I remember, and it was a mix of poetry and plays and prose, and that was just a feast for the mind and the soul. And I still remember that professor to this day, and have, when I've had the opportunities, thanked him for doing that. But that sort of small discussion-based reading, analyzing, questioning really opened things up. But there were also, larger classes, a big sort of introduction to Shakespeare class where we had to read most of Shakespeare's plays, and, just dwelling in that for a whole semester, all of a sudden it doesn't become so challenging to find your way around the language. You're sort of living it a little bit more, and then all of a sudden you're understanding it. That was a lot of fun. And then senior year, I did a special project that combined some of my loves, which was sort of an independent study, which looked at 3 operas and analyzed them from a sort of dramaturgy standpoint. So sort of reading them as literature while also bringing in some of my knowledge of the music as well, which was a lot of fun to sort of bring those worlds together. So I know there were others, I'm sure there were others, but those are some of the highlights for me that really stand out all these increasingly years later. I'd say do it again. I'd say don't let those fears that some people have about, yeah, but how are you going to use it? And have some sort of plan or specific sort of chart for your life uh, steer you away from something that really you love and that speaks to your soul and that challenges you to think and makes you spend time, not just accomplishing things, but sort of ruminating on things. Those ability to think deeply about something is, I think, a really important skill, regardless of how it ends up panning out in your life. I think there are certainly many career paths that one has available to them as an English major, even if they're not religious or anything like that. There's many opportunities to use those skills, but those skills are going to be essential and really not just essential, but important to develop and to cultivate. And I would venture to say, I think we could stand with a little more of skills like deep listening and analytical thinking and appreciation of other ideas and beauty, as well as the willingness to wrestle with deep and hard questions that may not have clear answers, as opposed to trying to either shoehorn everything into a very simple, systematic approach and say, well, it's either this, or it's black, or it's white. I don't think reality is like that. And I think my time studying literature was an opportunity to engage with the complexity of life and the fact that most things exist in a gray space, not in that black and white space. Haters are going to hate, so don't don't let them. Again, if this is something that really means something to you and really does speak to your soul, that I think is going to serve you better than any other aspect or practical education. And it may not mean that you're an English major, but it may means you allow yourself those chances to take courses that are going to flex those intellectual muscles. Because I can guarantee, I had friends who were English majors who went on to work in, banks or other sort of institutions that are working on spreadsheets all day and in front of computers, and yet I know they valued the education they had and didn't think it somehow didn't prepare them. They could learn everything they needed to know from a technical standpoint, but they also had a depth of soul and appreciation for humanity that they may not otherwise have had if they had not spent some time really exposing themselves to it in those formative years. I'm one who's a big believer that college is a time to explore and expand one's mind and horizons. There'll be plenty of time to focus in on careers and jobs and things like that as you move through life. But this is a time to really sample broadly, and being an English major allows you to do that. So I'm really happy to have done it, and I would do it all over again.